We are back with a video about France because the French government has collapsed again. This time a dramatic vote of no confidence sealed its fate, with the National Assembly tallying 331 votes for and 246 against. If you're wondering why French politics feels like a soap opera, it's because the National Assembly is split into three main camps. The far left to left-wing faction, New Popular Front, led by the fiery and ever-outspoken Jean-Luc Mélenchon, the far-right National Rally, commanded by the formidable Marine Le Pen and Jordan Bardella, and the centrist coalition Ensemble, helmed by President Emmanuel Macron. Each faction is armed with its own vision for France, and none seem willing to compromise, leading to the collapse of yet another French parliament. So what happens now? Well, we've identified four possible scenarios. But first, let's rewind and break down how we got here. Earlier this year, after a disastrous performance in the EU elections, President Emmanuel Macron called for a snap election for the National Assembly, the French parliament. In July, France went to the polls, and the results were clear. A deeply fractured assembly with no absolute majority for any party. After weeks of infighting and negotiation, an agreement was finally reached. Macron's party teamed up with the Republicans to form a centrist conservative minority government, with the reluctant and unstable support from the far-right National Rally. Michel Barnier was appointed prime minister, leading this fragile coalition. While this setup kept the government afloat for a while, it was always seen as temporary, as the far-right had leverage to bring the government down at any time. Just 3 months later, Barnier faced his first big test, the French budget. For years, France had been spending far more than it earned in taxes, pushing its deficit to over 6% of GDP, double the limit set by EU rules. On top of that, France's debt has skyrocketed to alarming levels. To put it into perspective, France's debt stands at around 110% of its GDP, while neighboring Germany is at just 60% of its GDP. These numbers aren't just a problem for France, they're a major concern for other European countries. Many fear that if France doesn't get its finances under control, it could trigger another Eurozone crisis, destabilizing the entire EU. To address this growing crisis, Barnier unveiled a bold plan. 40 billion euros in spending cuts and 20 billion euros in tax hikes, designed to inject 60 billion euros into France's struggling state coffers. But such a proposal was predictably unpopular in the National Assembly. Barnier sought to secure support for his proposal, but struggled to find a majority, even after making significant concessions. Thus, to push it through, Barnier invoked the controversial Article 49.3 of the French Constitution, allowing him to pass a social spending bill without a parliamentary vote. This decision sparked outrage, particularly on the left, who immediately called for a vote of no confidence. This is nothing new. The left had attempted no confidence votes before, but never got majority support. You see, Le Pen has previously said that her party will not back such motions. But last week, she appeared to have changed her mind and said that her MPs may vote in favor after all. Now, this is very bad news for Barnier and of course Macron. In a bid to save his government, Barnier held crisis talks on Monday with Marine Le Pen, hoping to secure her support, or at least her neutrality. Despite offering several concessions to address her concerns, Barnier's team accused Le Pen of repeatedly shifting her demands, reportedly presenting up to 17 different versions of her conditions. The night before the vote, Barnier made a last-ditch plea on national television, appealing directly to the French people and members of parliament, and urging unity to avoid political chaos. But it wasn't enough. Yesterday evening, the no-confidence vote took place, with 331 members of parliament voting in favor of the no-confidence vote. The result? The collapse of the minority government, and most likely the end of Barnier's time as prime minister. Many believe that Le Pen's true aim is far bigger than toppling Barnier. Her real motivation? Forcing President Macron himself, the centrist embodiment of everything she opposes, to step down. Here's the thing, the French political system operates on two levels. The government, led by the prime minister, handles domestic day-to-day affairs, while the president holds a powerful overarching role. That's the real prize Le Pen has her eyes on. After 3 failed attempts at winning the presidency, she's gearing up for another shot in 2027, or maybe even much sooner. So far, Le Pen has stopped short of directly calling for Macron's resignation, but hasn't ruled it out. Our constitution is clear, she said on Monday. In the event of a serious political crisis, the President of the Republic has three options: dissolution of the government, reshuffle the government, or resignation. But let's break this down. Dissolution isn't possible right now, as the French constitution only allows elections once a year, and the earliest would be July in 2025. Then there's reshuffling the government. This is also very difficult, given the fractured state of the parliament and the deep divisions between the three main camps. And that leaves option 3, which is what Le Pen is clearly hinting at. And public sentiment seems to back her. A poll released earlier this week by the conservative outlet CNews found that 62% of respondents believed Macron should resign if Barnier is ousted. Among National Rally supporters, that number jumps to 87%. But so far Macron isn't budging. Speaking on Tuesday evening, he was defiant. "I was elected twice by the French people," he said. "I'm extremely proud of this, and I will honor their trust with all my energy until the very last second of my term to serve the country." However, he is holding a speech tonight, so who knows what he will say there. If Macron doesn't resign, his most likely move is to attempt a government reshuffle. Here are his 4 main options. First, Macron could reselect Barnier as prime minister, despite his government just collapsing. While unconventional and controversial, this is technically allowed under the French constitution. Barnier would need to appoint a new cabinet, but it's almost guaranteed that he'd face another vote of no confidence immediately, putting the government back into crisis. Second, Macron could appoint a prime minister from the left. With the new Popular Front holding the most seats, Macron could try appointing someone from their camp. However, this seems unlikely. The NFP's candidates have struggled to gain enough support in the past, and any leftist prime minister would face enormous challenges maintaining power without major compromises from both the NFP and Macron's coalition. Third, Macron could attempt to appoint a politically neutral technocratic government. This approach would aim to focus on expertise rather than ideology, but with parliament so divided, such a government would likely collapse quickly, as no side is willing to cooperate for long. Or fourth, Macron could try to build a centrist coalition by bringing together moderate factions from the left and the right. For example, the Socialist Party could use this as an opportunity to distance itself from the more radical France Unbowed faction. However, this approach risks alienating socialist voters who oppose Macron, potentially pushing them further towards the far left Jean-Luc Mélenchon. A coalition this diverse would also face huge challenges staying united. So, these are the options on the table. But let's be very honest, each one of them seems unlikely to succeed. And at this point, it's anyone's guess where things will go from here. France's political crisis is also causing big problems for the EU. And the main issue is debt. Investors felt hopeful when Michel Barnier became prime minister and formed a government that could manage the budget. But now, after Barnier was removed in a no-confidence vote, fears about France's debt are growing. If far-left or far-right parties gain power, their expensive policies could lead to even more debt. This could trigger a European currency crisis, similar to what happened in Greece after 2008, especially since Germany is also struggling economically. This crisis could not come at a worse time. Ukraine is losing ground to Russia, Germany's government has also fallen, and Trump is coming to power. The EU desperately needs strong leadership, and currently it has none. But what do you think will happen? And what is your favorite option? And we also have a super cool video here about the recent Irish elections, which had a surprise result. Check it out here. And subscribe and share if you found this video interesting. And a huge shout out to our patrons, especially our presidents, Jan, Sjoukje, BJ, Peter, Kristen, and AGVD. Your support makes this all possible.